Think back to 2014, a Kickstarter for a video game was started. It promised to be a tough and unforgiving 2D roguelike RPG that expected you to make the most of your situation if anything went wrong. Out of the mountain of shit Kickstarter games that never made it out the door, a shining core was seen. With pride, it stood atop the leftovers of those that didn't make it, showing that it can be done. That game was Darkest Dungeon, and over the years since it released, it's received various expansions and now a sequel on the way. Let's talk about it. Before we get started, I'm going to say I'm not going to be explaining everything in this video. Honestly, a lot of mechanics in this game are very small, but they add up into one big ball and it would take forever to explain it all. Also, the footage in this video is going to be making use of mods. I'll be talking about those near the end, so just keep in your head that what you're seeing on screen is not what you're going to see if you were to buy just the game itself and you were to just play that. But trust me, mods make the game so much better. Darkest Dungeon is a 2D roguelike role-playing game. The player runs an old rundown town given to them by their ancestor and are given a task to find out what happened to them, either by clearing out the surrounding areas or by rushing into the final area themselves and hoping they win. Trust me, you don't. Even the devs are onto you. You get an achievement for sending newbies there, and they die. The game makes use of turn-based combat with a varying number of effects attached to abilities your characters can use. Each class has their own benefits, and the party's composition can make or break a run sometimes. Something as simple as not bringing a plague doctor or a crusader with you in a run on the ruins can really show this, as the filthy backliners proceed to constantly throw wine at you. They just really want to share their wine, and it's really annoying. Stop doing that! Of course I can't talk about Darkest Dungeon without talking about one of the most iconic parts of the game. The stress system is something that sounds complex, but actually it's simple to understand once you get into it. Each friendly character you control has a stress limit of 100. When they take heavy damage, crits, stress attacks from enemies, this will raise, and if it reaches 100 they can either become afflicted or virtuous. Afflicted teammates may ignore orders, or act on their own, or in some special cases, such as the Flagellant, they'll openly attack their teammates because they really don't like each other for some reason. It's a downside, yes, but it can be recovered from, and the stat changes you get can sometimes be a good or a bad thing. It depends on what kind of affliction you get, actually. On the flip side to this, there is Virtues. This is simply the opposite of an affliction. A character that overcomes their stress becomes virtuous and gains increased stats and even bonus effects depending on the type of virtue given. These can be lost, however, because when your characters reach 200 stress, they'll just straight up have a heart attack. Just a heart attack. If a virtuous character hits this, they'll also lose that virtuous status, so be careful out there, man. There's one thing I want to talk about, and it's a common thing, and that's how the game can be seen as bad. And that's because of the difficulty. So many reviews I've seen hating on the game is because it's too hard, it's too extremely punishing. And all I want to say to point this out is, well, I can only say it with a lack of better words. Get fucking good. Okay, obvious phrase aside, the game on its first screen, before you even get to pick a save, has a message. The game is intended to be hard. It's intended to be punishing. You will not always succeed. You'll fail. You'll have to live with the fucking consequences. A situation may not be what you wanted, but you'll want to make the best of it. The first screens of the game want to hammer in the fact that birds fly, grass grows, and brother, Darkest Dungeon is gonna make you its bitch. Graphically, the game has a clear aim and it meets it perfectly. I love the diorama art style that was chosen and later on made a legit thing in physical media that you could buy, which I sadly never got to buy because money reasons. You see something and you can easily tell what it is, apart from the eldritch abominations that just don't look straight at them. Sound-wise, everything is okay. Some sounds are a little weak in my opinion, but it's balanced out by more meaty sounds, and the biggest thing people praise the audio for.
Remind yourself that overconfidence is a slow and insidious killer. Foolish horrors, brought low and driven into the mud. The twisted faces of the damned, piled high and cloaked in malice.
Hey buddy, I think you got the wrong door. The leather club's 2 blocks down.
The narrator is excellent. His lines give much greater immersion in the game than just text would. Honestly, I feel like the narration is one of those legs that holds Darkest Dungeon up. You know, you got difficulty narration, you got memes, and you got modding, which we'll get into later. One last thing I'll say, because if I don't limit myself, God's sakes we would be here forever. I will say this, if you want to play this game and you're worried, the community is very welcoming. People will help if you ask them. Just don't go on the Steam forums, that's never a good idea. There are bad apples everywhere. But thankfully this community is a lot more welcoming than you would expect. First off, I'm just gonna say fuck off to like 80% of the Crimson Court DLC. It introduced a lot and was a pretty big DLC for what it was at the time, especially since it was the first one. But honestly, I just think it adds a lot to the tedium that can take place in Darkest Dungeon. And fucking speaking of tedium, while I love this game, I have put over way too many hours into it. I will say, a good quarter of that time spent in game is just waiting and going through motions and dealing with all the tedium that keeps coming up, like grinding your characters up to get them to higher levels. You always need to get more gold, you always need this, you always need that. You're running out of food, oh great, now you're screwed. And it just gets so tedious. It's not as bad as it was when the game was first out because more things have been introduced, the DLCs have added in more mechanics and everything, and just, ugh. I will say this, if you really hate tedium, I will honestly recommend to kind of avoid this, or you could edit the files. But I'm gonna be honest, if you edit the files just so you can have an easy time, you can be a bit of an asshole. The game does have tedium, and I hope it gets worked out in the sequel. They've already kind of worked it out with the introduction of the easier difficulties that remove some of the tedium. Psst! Hey kid, you want some mods? Well, fuck going to Skyrim for mods. Darkest Dungeon has a lot to keep you covered. Even down to some really out-of-place anime mods. Actually, hold on. Time out. Can I just say I don't see the joy in the anime mods Darkest Dungeon has? This is coming from a Toho weeb. And even with my weeb card, I just don't see what makes these mods so nice? I guess it's just the titties. Anyway, ever since modding got supported by the developers and Steam Workshop, support was added to the game years ago, mod makers of new and old came over and made some pretty glorious mods. The mods I tend to use are honestly more common mods you can find on the Steam Workshop, so I've only scratched the surface of modding myself. There's a lot more mods out there than what I've shown or what you've seen on screen, and I will link some mod credits at the end because I feel you should give credit when credit is due. Sadly, I don't think I've found all of them because, sweet Jesus, there are a lot of people. There is one warning I will give, however, about some mods. Be careful when camping, because I swear the most absurd things are placed in those things. I'm not even sure I can show this, man. So yeah, honestly, I can't say much else. Well, I can, but I don't want this video to take forever. I've already had to do rewrites and such because I kept going into a shell mode. But I honestly do love Darkest Dungeon, even with all its flaws. I didn't speak of everything. I'll be honest about that. I just really like this game, and I hope the sequel, whenever it comes out, I hope it's brilliant. So, yeah. I honestly can't say much else. Without possibly turning into a Cthulhuoid monster and eating the world or something. Who's there? Happy Halloween, everybody.